For 9 seasons, the Beverly Hillbillies turned a family of Ozark transplants into one of the most-watched sitcoms in American television history. 60 million viewers at its peak tuned in to watch the Clampetts navigate the strange customs of Beverly Hills. But away from the cameras, the men and women who brought Jed, Granny, Ellie Mae, and the rest of Bug Tussle to life carried burdens the show never hinted at. Illness hidden from the public, marriages that quietly collapsed, a feud that outlived a friendship, and in one case, a tragedy that shocked the entire country. This is the real story of 13 cast members from the Beverly Hillbillies, and how their lives came to an end. Christian Buddy Ebsen Jr. was born on April 2, 1908, in Belleville, Illinois, and grew up largely in Florida, where his father ran a dance studio. The family's finances took a hit when the Florida land boom collapsed in the 1920s, cutting short Ebsen's plans for college and pushing him toward the stage instead. He found work as a dancer on Broadway, appearing alongside Judy Garland in Broadway Melody of 1938, and by the end of the decade he'd landed a plum role in Hollywood's biggest production of the year, The Wizard of Oz. Ebsen wasn't originally cast as the Tin Man. He was meant to play the Scarecrow before producers swapped him with Ray Bolger. 10 days into filming, the aluminum dust used in his silver makeup coated his lungs. He was rushed to the hospital struggling to breathe, spent 2 weeks recovering, and was ultimately replaced by Jack Haley. The studio was slow to acknowledge how serious it was. Ebsen later said MGM doubted he was really sick. He recovered, but by his own account the ordeal stayed with him. His personal life had its own turbulence. His first marriage, to dancer Ruth Cambridge in 1936, ended in 1946 amid the pressures of his career. His second marriage, to Nancy Walcott, lasted nearly 2 decades and produced 5 children before ending in divorce. He later married Dorothy Knott in 1985, a union that lasted the rest of his life. Ebsen found his defining role relatively late in life, landing Jed Clampett at age 54 and turning the Beverly Hillbillies into a phenomenon, followed by another hit series, Barnaby Jones. But one moment off-screen left a lasting mark on his legacy. During co-star Nancy Culp's 1984 run for Congress, Ebsen recorded a radio ad for her opponent, calling her too liberal. Culp was stunned, and the two were never close again. Buddy Ebsen died of respiratory failure on July 6, 2003, in Torrance, California, at age 95, outliving nearly everyone he'd worked with. Irene Ryan was born Jessie Irene Noblet in 1902. Accounts differ on her birthplace, with some records pointing to El Paso and others to San Francisco. She began performing as a child to help support her family, working her way through vaudeville, radio, and eventually film before Paul Henning cast her, at 59, as Granny, a role originally intended for Bea Benaderet. Ryan's audition, hair pulled back and full of feisty energy, changed the producers' minds on the spot. The part earned her 2 Emmy nominations. Her personal life included 2 marriages, to Tim Ryan and later Harold Knox, both ending in divorce, and she had no children. After the Beverly Hillbillies ended, she pursued a lifelong dream of Broadway, landing the role of Bert in Bob Fosse's Pippin in 1972 and stopping the show nightly with the song, No Time at All. She earned a Tony nomination for the role. In March 1973, weeks after that nomination, Ryan suffered an apparent stroke on stage during a performance. She flew home to California, where doctors discovered an inoperable glioblastoma, a malignant brain tumor. By some accounts, she was never told the full severity of her diagnosis. She died on April 26, 1973, at age 70, from the tumor combined with heart disease. Buddy Ebsen and Max Baer Jr. served as pallbearers. She left her estate to fund an acting scholarship that still supports student performers today. Donna Douglas was born Doris Ione Smith on September 26, 1932, in Pride, Louisiana. She grew up playing sports and competing in local beauty pageants before moving to New York to model, eventually landing small television roles. She was chosen for Ellie Mae from a large pool of actresses and played the character in all 274 episodes of the series. Her first marriage, to Roland Bourgeois Jr., produced her only child before ending in divorce. A second marriage, to Beverly Hillbillies director Robert Leeds, also ended in divorce. After the show, Douglas shifted toward gospel music, inspirational speaking, and writing, and later filed lawsuits against Mattel and CBS Consumer Products over the unauthorized use of her image on an Ellie Mae Barbie doll, a case she settled in 2011. In 2014, Douglas was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, a disease often caught late and difficult to treat. She died on January 1, 2015, at Baton Rouge General Hospital, at age 82. Raymond Bailey was born on May 6, 1904, in San Francisco. Before acting took hold, he cycled through jobs as a day laborer, a stockbroker, a banker, and a merchant seaman, even working for a time on a Hawaiian pineapple plantation. He didn't land steady screen work until his 30s, eventually building a career in film noir before television made him a household name as the excitable banker forever trying to keep the Clampettes' fortune and his job intact. Bailey married Gabby Ida George in 1951, and they remained together until his death. As the series wound down in the early 1970s, colleagues noticed him having trouble remembering lines. He was later understood to be showing symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. He made only 2 more film appearances after the show ended and stopped working entirely by 1975. He spent his final years largely out of the public eye between a condo and a houseboat in Laguna Niguel, keeping in occasional contact with former co-star Nancy Culp. Raymond Bailey died of a heart attack on April 15, 1980, in Irvine, California, at age 75. Nancy Culp was born on August 28, 1921, in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, to a traveling salesman and a schoolteacher. She earned a journalism degree, served as a lieutenant in the U.S. Naval Reserve during World War II, and worked as a publicist before a chance encounter with director George Cukor pushed her into acting. Paul Henning wrote the role of Jane Hathaway specifically for her, and she'd go on to appear in 246 of the show's 274 episodes, earning an Emmy nomination along the way. Her marriage to Charles Dacus in 1951 ended in divorce 2 years later, and she never remarried or had children. In 1984, Culp ran for Congress in Pennsylvania as a Democrat, a long-shot bid in a heavily Republican district. Her former co-star Buddy Ebsen publicly backed her opponent, recording a radio ad that called her too liberal. Culp lost the race and later said she felt the interference was uncalled for, though she stopped short of blaming Ebsen for the defeat outright. She went on to teach at Juniata College. A longtime smoker, Culp was diagnosed with cancer in 1990 and underwent treatment, but the disease had spread by the following year. She died on February 3, 1991, in Palm Desert, California, at age 69. Her gravestone in Mifflintown, Pennsylvania, still reads Miss Jane Hathaway. Harriet McGibbon was born on October 5, 1905, in Chicago, the daughter of a physician. She trained at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts and built a long career on Broadway and in regional theater before Hollywood began casting her as icy, upper-crust society women, a type she brought fully to life as Mrs. Drysdale, the snobbish wife determined to keep the Clampettes at arm's length. She married twice, first to William Reno Kane in 1930, a marriage that produced her only child before ending in divorce, and then to writer Charles Corwin White in 1942, a union that lasted until his death on Christmas Day, 1967. Her son, William McGibbon Kane, became an art historian specializing in Paul Gauguin, and he died in 1977, 10 years before his mother. Harriet McGibbon died of heart and lung failure on February 8, 1987, at age 81. B. Benaderet was born on April 4, 1906, in New York City and raised in San Francisco. Long before the Beverly Hillbillies, she'd built a substantial career in radio and television, working alongside Jack Benny and voicing Betty Rubble on The Flintstones. Henning initially wanted her to play Granny, but after seeing Irene Ryan's audition, he shifted her to the role of Pearl Bodine, Jethro's mother, and soon after, gave her the lead in his next series, Petticoat Junction, where she became Kate Bradley. Her first marriage, to actor Jim Bannon, ended in divorce after a decade, and she raised their 2 children largely on her own before finding a stable second marriage with sound technician Eugene Twombly in 1958. In 1967, a routine checkup revealed a growth on her lung. Surgery the following year confirmed lung cancer. She underwent radiation treatment and briefly returned to Petticoat Junction. But the illness returned and worsened. She died on October 13, 1968, at Good Samaritan Hospital in Los Angeles, at age 62. In a devastating coincidence, her husband Eugene Twombly suffered a fatal heart attack just 4 days later, the day after her funeral. He was buried beside her. Sharon Tate was born on January 24, 1943, in Dallas, Texas, the daughter of an Army officer whose postings took the family across the country and overseas. She began modeling in the early 1960s and landed a recurring role as Secretary Janet Trago on the Beverly Hillbillies in 1963, appearing in several episodes over the next 2 seasons. Her career accelerated quickly after that. A Golden Globe nomination for Valley of the Dolls in 1967, and a marriage to director Roman Polanski in 1968. The couple settled into a rented home on Cielo Drive in Los Angeles, and by the summer of 1969, Tate was 8.5 months pregnant with their first child. On the night of August 8th to 9th, 1969, Tate and 4 others, Jay Sebring, Wojciech Frykowski, Abigail Folger, and Stephen Parent, were murdered in the Cielo Drive house by members of Charles Manson's cult. She was 26 years old. The killings shocked the country and are widely remembered as a turning point that closed out the optimism of the 1960s. Tate was buried at Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City. Charles Lane, born Charles Gerstle Levison on January 26, 1905, in San Francisco, was one of the last surviving witnesses to the 1906 earthquake that leveled his hometown as an infant. He sold insurance before friends encouraged him toward the stage, and he joined the Pasadena Playhouse before breaking into film in 1931. Over the following decades, he became one of Hollywood's most reliably cast character actors, typically playing scowling bank examiners, judges, and other no-nonsense officials, a persona that made him a favorite foil for Lucille Ball and a recurring presence across the Beverly Hillbillies as landlord Foster Finney, Petticoat Junction as railroad executive Homer Bedloe, and dozens of other shows. He married Ruth Covell in 1931, and the marriage lasted more than 70 years, until her death in 2002. Lane kept working well into his 90s and was celebrated on his 100th birthday at the TV Land Awards. He died peacefully at his Brentwood home on July 9, 2007, at age 102. According to his son, he simply closed his eyes and stopped breathing. Phil Silvers was born Philip Silver on May 11, 1911, in Brooklyn, the youngest of 8 children of Russian Jewish immigrants. He began performing as a boy, singing in theaters, and worked his way through vaudeville and Broadway before finding stardom on television as Sergeant Bilko in The Phil Silvers Show. He later made recurring guest appearances on the Beverly Hillbillies as con man Shifty Schaefer. Both of his marriages, to Jo Carol Dennison and Evelyn Patrick, ended in divorce. He had 5 daughters from his second marriage. Silvers battled compulsive gambling and depression for much of his life, and in 1972, while starring in a Broadway revival of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, he suffered a stroke that left his speech permanently slurred and effectively ended his stage career, though he continued taking television roles into the early 1980s. Phil Silvers died in his sleep at his home in Century City, California, on November 1, 1985, at age 74. Kathleen Freeman was born on February 17, 1923, in Chicago, into a vaudeville family, and made her first stage appearance at around age 2. She studied at UCLA before an early comedic performance redirected her toward a career playing sharp-tongued maids, teachers, and neighbors in more than 100 films, including Singin' in the Rain and The Blues Brothers. On the Beverly Hillbillies, she recurred as Flo Schaefer. Freeman never married and had no children. She spent much of her adult life with longtime companion Helen Ramsey. In her 70s, she finally made her Broadway debut in The Full Monty, earning a Tony nomination for her performance as the show's wisecracking pianist. She continued performing even after being diagnosed with lung cancer during the run, giving her final performance just days before her death. Kathleen Freeman died on August 23, 2001, at Lenox Hill Hospital in New York, at age 78. Roy Roberts, born Roy Barnes Jones on March 19, 1906, in Dade City, Florida. Spent decades as one of television's most familiar face-you-know, name-you-don't character actors, appearing in an estimated 900 stage and screen productions. On the Beverly Hillbillies, he recurred as rival banker John Cushing, and he held similar authority figure roles on Petticoat Junction, Bewitched, and The Lucy Show, among many others. He married Lillian Moore in 1947, and they remained together until his death. Roberts continued working steadily into the mid-1970s despite declining health. He died of a heart attack on May 28, 1975, in Los Angeles, at age 69, and was buried in Fort Worth, Texas. Percy Helton was born on January 31, 1894, in Manhattan, into a theatrical family, and began performing in his father's vaudeville act by the age of 2. As a young stage actor, one especially demanding role that required him to scream night after night permanently damaged his vocal cords, leaving him with the raspy, breathless voice that would become his trademark for the rest of his career. He served in the U.S. Army in Europe during World War I before returning to acting, eventually becoming one of the most familiar character actors in post-war Hollywood, with credits ranging from Miracle on 34th Street to Kiss Me Deadly. On the Beverly Hillbillies, he played put-upon bank clerk Homer Cratchit in the show's later seasons. Helton married Edna Eustace in 1931. The couple had no children. He continued working right up until his death, passing away of natural causes at Hollywood Presbyterian Medical Center on September 11, 1971, at age 77.